The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched like a metal canyon toward the stars. 12 different alien species sat in their assigned seats, each representing thousands of worlds. At the center of it all sat the humans, the newest members of this ancient organization. Hyunwoo Kim adjusted his formal diplomatic robes as he walked toward the speaking platform. His black hair was starting to show gray at the temples, a sign of the stress from 5 years as Earth's main representative to the Council. Behind him walked his aide, a young woman named So Young Park who carried herself like the military officer she used to be. The council chamber buzzed with alien voices speaking in dozens of languages. The universal translator in Hyunwoo's ear turned their words into Korean, though he had learned to speak Galactic Standard years ago. Today felt different. The other species were watching the humans more carefully than usual. The Vorthak representative, a tall blue creature with 4 arms, stood up first. His voice boomed across the chamber. "We call this emergency session to discuss the human problem." Hyunwoo felt his jaw tighten. Problem? What problem? Humans had followed every law, every treaty, every rule the Council had given them. They paid their taxes, shared their technology, and helped with peacekeeping missions across the galaxy. The Kalari delegate, who looked like a walking tree with silver bark, spoke next. In 80 years, humans have spread to over 200 worlds. This expansion rate is unprecedented and dangerous. Other aliens nodded in agreement. The Zephyrians, with their crystal-like bodies, chimed in musical tones that the translator turned into words. They build too fast, grow too quickly, ask too few questions. Hyunwoo stood up slowly. His voice carried across the chamber without amplification. Honored members of the Council, humans have broken no laws. Every colony we have established follows proper procedures. We file all required documents and pay all required fees. The Vorthak waved one of his 4 hands dismissively. Laws are not the issue, human. Your species lacks wisdom. You act before you think. You expand before you understand. We understand perfectly, So Young said, stepping forward. Her voice was sharp like a blade. We understand that our colonies provide food for 17 different species. We understand that our trading ships carry goods to worlds that never had access to them before. We understand that human medical teams have saved millions of lives across the galaxy. The chamber fell silent. So Young had spoken out of turn, but her words rang true. Human colonies did feed much of the galaxy. Human doctors did work in the poorest sectors of space. Human engineers had built the great trade routes that connected distant worlds. The council leader, an ancient being called the First Speaker, raised his hand for silence. His species was so old that no one remembered their original name. They just called themselves the Eternal. His voice was like wind through dead leaves. The issue is not what humans have done, he said. The issue is what humans might do. Your species carries the seeds of chaos. You are too young, too aggressive, too unpredictable. Hyunwoo felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. We have been nothing but peaceful. Our expansion helps everyone. Our technology saves lives, for now, the First Speaker replied. But what happens when you decide you want more? What happens when you grow tired of Council oversight? What happens when humanity decides it knows better than species who have traveled the stars for thousands of years? The other delegates murmured agreement. Hyunwoo could see fear in their alien eyes. Fear of humans, but why? What had humans done to earn such suspicion? The First Speaker stood up, his ancient form towering over the assembly. The Council has made a decision. Humanity will surrender control of 100 of your colonies to Council oversight. You will accept guidance protocols that will help control your expansion. You will submit your military forces to Council command. The chamber exploded in noise. Alien voices rose in approval. But Hyunwoo just stared at the First Speaker in shock. They wanted to take half of human space. They wanted to turn humanity into vassals, like children who could not be trusted to make their own decisions. So Young stepped closer to Hyunwoo. Her hand moved toward the weapon she was not supposed to carry in the council chamber. Sir, she whispered, this is not a negotiation. This is surrender. Hyunwoo held up his hand to stop her. He walked to the center of the speaking platform and looked around the chamber. Hundreds of alien eyes watched him. The future of humanity hung on his next words. No, he said simply. The word echoed in the sudden silence. The First Speaker tilted his ancient head. Excuse me? No, Hyunwoo repeated louder this time. Humanity rejects this proposal. We have committed no crimes. We have broken no laws. We will not surrender our freedom because you are afraid of what we might become. The Vorthak delegate slammed one of his hands on his desk. You dare refuse the council? I dare speak for my people, Yunwu replied. And my people will never accept slavery, no matter how nicely you dress it up. The first speaker's eyes glowed with ancient anger. You misunderstand, human. This is not a request. This is a requirement. The council has voted. The decision is final. Hyunwoo looked around the chamber one more time. He saw fear, anger, and arrogance in the alien faces, but he also saw something else. He saw beings who had grown comfortable with power, who had forgotten what it meant to earn respect instead of demanding it. Then humanity formally rejects the authority of this council, he said. His voice carried to every corner of the great hall. We came here as partners. We offered friendship, cooperation, and mutual benefit. In return, you offer us chains. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted in a dozen languages. Security guards moved toward the human section. But Hyunwoo and So Young walked calmly toward the exit. The first speaker's voice rose above the noise. You have 30 standard days to comply, humans. 30 days to accept wisdom. If you refuse, the council will take corrective measures. Hyunwoo stopped at the chamber door. He turned back to face the assembly one last time. The human species survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and extinction events. We crossed the void between stars with nothing but courage and determination. We built a civilization that spans hundreds of worlds. And you think we will surrender all of that because you are afraid? He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You should be afraid, but not of what we might become. You should be afraid of what you just turned us into. With that, the human delegation left the council chamber. Behind them, alien voices rose in anger and concern. They had expected the humans to bow their heads and accept the council's wisdom. Instead, they had declared their independence. As they walked through the corridors of the great station, So Young spoke quietly to Hyunwoo. Sir, what happens now? Hyunwoo was already composing the message he would send to Earth, a message that would change everything. Now we find out if the council is as wise as they think they are, he said. And they find out if humans are as dangerous as they fear. The die was cast. The council had gone too far, and now peace was departing from humanity. What came next would reshape the galaxy forever. 3 weeks had passed since the ultimatum. On the human colony of New Busan, Yu Jin-song stood on the observation deck of the main administrative building, watching supply ships land at the spaceport below. The ships came less frequently now, and the ones that did arrive often carried stories of attacks and missing vessels. Yu Jin was a thin woman with sharp eyes who had managed New Busan for 7 years. The colony was home to 3 million people and served as a major food producer for this sector of space. Fields of modified Earth crops stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction, feeding not just humans but dozens of alien species as well. Her assistant, a young man named Tae Woo-nam, approached with a datapad in his hands. His face looked troubled. Administrator, we have another problem with the supply convoy from Kepler Station. What kind of problem? Yu Jin asked, though she already suspected the answer. Pirates hit them 2 days out from here. They lost 4 cargo ships and their escort vessel. Captain Han is missing, presumed dead. Tae-woo's voice was tight with controlled anger. That's the 5th convoy this month. Yu Jin took the datapad and reviewed the attack report. The details were always similar. Unknown ships would appear as if from nowhere, disable the escort vessels with advanced weapons, then destroy or capture the cargo ships. No demands for ransom, no attempts to negotiate, just violence and destruction. Have our defense forces found any trace of these pirates? She asked. Nothing useful. They use ships we don't recognize, weapons we can't identify, and they vanish completely after each attack. It's like they know exactly where our convoys will be and when. Yu Jin frowned. Pirates were usually opportunistic criminals who attacked weak targets for easy profit. These attacks were too coordinated, too well-informed, too sophisticated. Someone was providing these pirates with military-grade equipment and intelligence. On Earth, in the underground intelligence facility beneath Seoul, Min Ho Choi was reaching the same conclusion. He sat in a small, windowless room surrounded by holographic displays showing shipping routes, attack patterns, and intercepted communications. As the head of the External Threats Analysis Division, it was his job to find patterns that others missed. Computer, overlay council military movements with the pirate attack locations. he said. The holographic display shifted, showing both sets of data on the same map. Minho's eyes widened. Every single pirate attack had occurred within 48 hours of a council patrol passing through the same area. Either this was the most incredible coincidence in galactic history, or the council was feeding information to the pirates. Minho pulled up financial records next. Following money trails was often more revealing than following ships. He traced payments from various council accounts to shipping companies, mercenary groups, and private military contractors. The amounts were small enough to avoid attention, but when added together, they totaled billions of credits. Computer. Cross-reference payment recipients with known pirate organizations and mercenary groups. The results made his blood run cold. 70% of the payments went to groups that had been flagged as potential threats to human shipping. The council wasn't just allowing the attacks to happen, they were paying for them. Minho immediately sent his findings to the Human High Command and to Ambassador Hyunwoo Kim, who was still on Nexus Prime trying to negotiate a peaceful solution. The response came back within hours. Hyunwoo would present the evidence to the council and demand an explanation. The council chamber was less crowded for this emergency session. Only the core members were present, along with their security details and advisors. Hyunwoo stood at the speaking platform with a data crystal containing all of Minho's evidence. "Honored members," he began, "I come before you with evidence of a serious crime against humanity." The first speaker looked bored. "What crime do you imagine we have committed, human?" "The crime of funding terrorist attacks against civilian shipping." Hyunwoo activated the holographic display, showing the attack patterns and financial records. "Your own records show payments to mercenary groups that have attacked our colonies. You have been sponsoring piracy while publicly calling for peace." The chamber was silent as the evidence displayed in the air above them. The financial trails were clear, the timing was undeniable, and the pattern was obvious. But instead of shame or apology, Hyunwoo saw only cold calculation in the alien faces around him. The Vorthak delegate spoke first. "These are internal security operations designed to protect our shipping lanes from human aggression." "Human aggression?" Hyunwoo's voice rose in disbelief. "We're the ones being attacked. You are the ones expanding too rapidly," the Kalari representative replied. "Your growth threatens established trade routes and territorial boundaries. These operations are designed to slow your expansion to manageable levels." The first speaker nodded slowly. "The attacks you call piracy are simply market corrections. Your people spread too far too fast. The galaxy requires balance." Hyunwoo stared at them in shock. They weren't denying the attacks. They were justifying them. In their minds, human civilians deserved to die because humanity was growing too quickly. "You're talking about murder," he said quietly. "Those were civilian ships, families, children." "Casualties of your own poor judgment," the first speaker replied dismissively. "Accept the council's guidance and the attacks will stop. Continue your stubborn expansion and the galaxy will correct itself." That was when Hyunwoo realized the truth. The 30-day ultimatum had been a lie. The council had never intended to wait for humanity's answer. They had been implementing their corrective measures from the beginning, hoping to force human surrender through economic warfare and terror. Back on New Busan, Yujin was dealing with the latest attack's aftermath when the priority message arrived from Earth. She read Hyunwoo's report about the council's involvement with growing horror and rage. The pirates weren't pirates at all. They were council-sponsored terrorists. She called an emergency meeting of the Colonial Council and shared the information. The reaction was immediate and unanimous. If the council wanted a war, they would get one, but the council wasn't finished with their escalation. 2 days later, long-range sensors detected a massive convoy approaching New Busan. 40 ships, flying council peacekeeping flags. Their commander broadcast a message to the colony. "This is Admiral Vextar of the Council Peacekeeping Force. We are here to establish a protection zone around New Busan Colony. All human military forces will stand down and submit to council authority." Yujin stood in the colony's command center, surrounded by her staff and the local defense commander. Outside, council ships were taking positions around the planet. They claimed to be there for protection, but everyone knew the truth. This was an invasion disguised as peacekeeping. "What are your orders, Administrator?" asked Commander Park, a stern woman who led the colony's small defense force. Yujin looked at the tactical display showing council ships surrounding her world. 3 million civilians depended on her decision, but she also knew that surrender would not bring safety. The Council had already shown they were willing to kill civilians to achieve their goals. "Send a message to Admiral Vextar," she said. "Tell him that New Busan colony rejects Council authority. Tell him that if he wants this world, he'll have to take it by force." Commander Park smiled grimly. "And if he tries?" Yujin's voice was calm, but her eyes burned with determination. "Then we show him that humans don't surrender their homes without a fight." The Council had made their move. They had revealed their true nature. Now humanity would have to decide how far they were willing to go to protect their freedom. The peaceful expansion was over. The real war was about to begin. The passenger transport New Hope was 3 days out from Earth when the Council patrol found them. Captain Jamin Lee was reviewing the ship's navigation charts when his communications officer called out from across the bridge. "Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from a Council vessel. They're ordering us to stop for inspection." Jamin looked up from his charts. The New Hope was a civilian transport carrying 50,000 colonists to the Outer Rim territories. Men, women, children, elderly people, all seeking new lives on distant worlds. They had every right to travel through this space under existing treaties. "Tell them we're a civilian vessel carrying legal passengers," Jamin ordered. "We'll transmit our manifest and travel permits." The communications officer worked at his console for several minutes before looking back at the captain with a worried expression. "Sir, they're not accepting our credentials. They say all human civilian traffic is suspended pending Council review." Jamin felt a cold weight in his stomach. The 30-day ultimatum had expired yesterday. Earth's government had formally refused the Council's demands, and now it seemed the Council was taking more direct action. "How many ships are out there?" he asked. "3 heavy cruisers, sir. Council peacekeeping fleet markings." Jamin closed his eyes for a moment. 3 Council cruisers could destroy the New Hope without even slowing down, but 50,000 people were counting on him to get them to safety. His own wife and 2 children were among the passengers. "Signal the Council ships," he said. "Tell them we are exercising our right to free passage under Article 7 of the Galactic Commerce Treaty. We will not submit to unlawful detention." What happened next would be remembered as the moment the Council's mask finally slipped away completely. On Earth, in the emergency session of the Human High Command, Dong Hyun-yu stood before a room full of generals, admirals, and civilian leaders. As Prime Minister, he had spent his entire career believing in diplomacy and peaceful solutions. But the reports flooding in from across human space painted a clear picture. The Council was no longer pretending to follow their own laws. Admiral Ji-won Kang, the head of the human fleet, was briefing the assembled leaders on the military situation. She was a tall woman with gray hair and scars on her hands from her time as a fighter pilot. Her voice was calm, but everyone could hear the anger underneath. "The Council has declared martial law in 17 sectors, she reported. "They're calling it emergency peacekeeping operations, but they're seizing human colonies, arresting civilian leaders, and shutting down our trade routes." General Seok Jin-bae, who led the Special Operations Command, added his own intelligence. "Our deep cover agents report that the Council is mobilizing forces from across the galaxy. This isn't just pressure tactics anymore. They're preparing for total occupation of human space." Dong Hyun listened to the reports with growing dismay. Everything he had worked for, everything humanity had built in their peaceful expansion across the stars, was being swept away by alien arrogance and fear. "What about Ambassador Kim's negotiations?" asked the foreign minister. Admiral Kang shook her head. "The Council expelled our diplomatic mission yesterday. Ambassador Kim and his staff are on their way back to Earth. The Council says there's nothing left to negotiate." The room fell silent. Dong Hyun looked around at the faces of humanity's leaders. These were good people who had dedicated their lives to building a better future. Now they faced a choice that would define their species for generations to come. "Prime Minister," General Bae said quietly, "I need to ask you a direct question. Are we at war?" Before Dong Hyun could answer, an aide rushed into the room with a priority message. Her face was pale as she handed the datapad to the Prime Minister. He read it once, then again, unable to believe the words on the screen. "What is it?" Admiral Kang asked. Dong Hyun's voice was barely a whisper. "The transport New Hope. Council forces destroyed it 6 hours ago. All 50,000 passengers gone." The room erupted in shocked voices and angry shouts, but Dong Hyun just stood there staring at the message. 50,000 civilians, families, children, murdered because they were human and dared to travel through space that had been open to them for decades. Admiral Kang's voice cut through the noise. "Sir, the Council is claiming the New Hope was carrying military supplies. They say it was a legitimate target." "Military supplies?" Dong-hyun looked up, his eyes burning with rage. "It was a passenger transport. They killed children." General Bay stepped forward. "Prime Minister, I'm sorry to press you at a time like this, but we need a decision. Our forces are standing by, but we need orders. Are we going to fight?" Dong-hyun thought about Captain Jamin Lee, who had sent a final message before his ship was destroyed. The captain had refused to surrender because he believed in humanity's right to exist freely in the galaxy. Now he was dead, along with his wife, his children, and 50,000 other innocent people. The Council had called humans dangerous and unpredictable. They had said humanity was too young, too aggressive, too chaotic to be trusted with freedom. And their solution was genocide disguised as peacekeeping. Dong-hyun walked to the center of the room and looked at each leader in turn. "The Council made their choice when they decided our civilians were acceptable casualties," he said. "They wanted to see humanity's true nature. They wanted to know what we're really capable of." He turned to Admiral Kang. "Admiral, you are authorized to implement Protocol 7. Admiral Kang's eyes widened. Protocol 7 was humanity's deepest secret, the contingency plan they had hoped never to use. "Sir, are you certain? Once we begin, there's no going back." "The Council already made sure there's no going back," Dong-hyun replied. "They demanded our peace, and when we offered it, they chose war instead. So be it." He activated the emergency broadcast system that would carry his message to every human world, every colony, every ship in space. His words would be remembered for thousands of years. "Citizens of humanity," he began, "for 80 years, we have expanded across the galaxy in peace. We have followed the laws, honored the treaties, and offered friendship to all species. We have asked for nothing but the right to exist and grow as free beings." His voice grew stronger as he continued. "The Galactic Council has answered our peaceful intentions with violence. They have murdered 50,000 civilians, including children, because they decided humanity is too dangerous to exist freely. They call us aggressive while they sponsor terrorists. They call us unpredictable while they break their own laws." Admiral Kang was already sending coded messages to fleet commanders across human space. In secret bases and hidden facilities, weapons that had been concealed for decades were being powered up. Ships that appeared to be civilian transports were revealing their true nature as warships. The peaceful expansion had been a facade hiding humanity's real strength. "The Council believes they can control us through fear," Dong-hyun continued. "They believe we will surrender our freedom to preserve our lives. They are wrong. Humanity has faced extinction before, and we have always chosen to fight rather than submit." He paused, thinking of the 50,000 dead on the New Hope. The Council wanted to see humanity's true nature. They wanted to know what we become when pushed beyond all reason. Today they will learn. The broadcast ended, but its effects would ripple across the galaxy. On 1,000 human worlds, colonial militias were mobilizing. In hidden bases, the real human fleet was emerging from decades of concealment. And in the depths of space, weapons that the Council had never imagined were being aimed at their forces. The Council had gone too far. They had mistaken humanity's restraint for weakness, their diplomacy for submission. Now they would discover the difference between a humanity that chose peace and a humanity that chose war. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had once been the apex predators of their homeworld, and why making them angry was the last mistake the Council would ever make. Admiral Vextar of the Council Peacekeeping Force stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display with growing confusion. His fleet of 40 ships had been maintaining orbit around New Busan for 2 weeks, enforcing the Council's protection zone. The human colonists had refused to cooperate, but they had no military force capable of challenging his fleet, or so he had thought. "Admiral," his sensor officer called out, "I'm detecting multiple energy signatures rising from the planet's surface." Vextar looked at the display. What had appeared to be agricultural processing centers were now revealing themselves as massive defense platforms. Weapons that could threaten his heavy cruisers were emerging from underground bunkers across the colony. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Our intelligence said this was a farming world with minimal defenses." His intelligence officer, a nervous Kalari named Branch Whisper, consulted his data. "Sir, Our records show only a small police force and basic orbital defenses. These installations don't exist in any of our files. That was because humanity had learned long ago not to trust the Council with complete information. What appeared to be peaceful agricultural colonies were actually fortress worlds, designed to defend the outer edge of human space. The Council's intelligence had been deliberately fed false data for decades. On the planet's surface, Yujin Song stood in the real command center, buried deep beneath what the Council thought was a food processing plant. Around her, military officers who had pretended to be farmers and engineers for years were now revealing their true expertise. Defense Grid 7 is online, reported Colonel Kim, the colony's actual military commander. All orbital platforms are powered and armed. Yujin looked at the tactical display showing the Council fleet. What's our situation? 40 Council ships versus 60 hidden defense platforms and the orbital defense grid, Colonel Kim replied. We're outnumbered but not outgunned. Our weapons are designed specifically to counter Council technology. Yujin smiled grimly. Then let's show them what a farming world can really do. Across human space, similar scenes were playing out. The Proxima colony, which the Council thought was a mining operation, revealed itself as a major fleet base. The research station at Wolf 359 suddenly bristled with weapons that could crack a moon in half. Tourist resorts became fortress worlds, trade depots became military staging areas, and peaceful merchants became warships. Admiral Jiwan Kang commanded this transformation from her flagship, Terra's Fury, hidden in the asteroid belt of the Sol system. For decades, she had watched the real human fleet grow in secret, while the Council believed they were monitoring a few dozen obsolete patrol boats. All units, this is Admiral Kang, she broadcast on the encrypted command frequency. Operation Broken Chain is now active. All pretenses are hereby abandoned. Show them what humanity really looks like. The response was immediate and devastating. What the Council had thought were isolated human colonies were actually nodes in an integrated defense network spanning hundreds of star systems. What they had believed were primitive human technologies were actually advanced weapons designed by the galaxy's most innovative species, engineer. Wujin Lim had spent 20 years developing these weapons in secret research facilities. His quantum torpedoes could phase through shields and armor to detonate inside enemy ships. His phase-shift fighters could become invisible to most sensors. His AI-assisted battle networks could coordinate attacks across multiple star systems simultaneously. But the real surprise was the human doctrine of warfare itself. The Council fought wars the way they had for thousands of years, with massive fleets engaged in formal battles between military forces. Humans fought to win, using every advantage and targeting every weakness. Captain Hyrin led the first human counteroffensive from her stealth carrier Shadow of Earth. She was a tactical genius who had studied every Council military engagement for the past century, learning their patterns and identifying their weaknesses. Target their command ships first, she ordered her squadron leaders. Council fleets can't function without centralized control. Cut off the head and the body dies. Her fighters moved like ghosts through space using technology the Council didn't know existed. They struck from impossible angles, disappeared when targeted, and reappeared where the enemy least expected them. Within 6 hours, Hyrin's squadron had destroyed the command ships of 3 different Council fleets. But the humans' greatest advantage wasn't their technology or their tactics. It was their motivation. The Council fought to maintain their power and control. Humans fought to protect their families and their freedom. Lieutenant Kyung-Soo-an flew one of the new phase-shift fighters in the battle for the Kepler system. His ship could become intangible, passing through enemy fire like it wasn't there. But what made him truly dangerous was the rage burning in his heart. Kyung-Soo had been on leave visiting his sister's family when the Council attacked the transport New Hope. His nephew had been scheduled to be on that ship but had gotten sick at the last minute. 50,000 other families weren't so lucky. This is for the New Hope, he whispered as he lined up his attack run on a Council battleship. His torpedo phased through the ship's shields and armor, detonating in the reactor core. The battleship simply ceased to exist. The Council's response to humanity's revealed strength was panic. They had expected a quick victory over a primitive species. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move and counter their every strategy. Admiral Vextar's fleet around New Busan was the first to be completely destroyed. The human defense platforms targeted his ships with weapons that shouldn't have existed. When he tried to retreat, he found his escape routes blocked by human warships that had appeared from nowhere. "How many ships do they have?" he demanded as his fleet died around him. Branch Whisper was frantically trying to update their intelligence estimates. "Sir, we're detecting human military assets in systems where our records show only civilian populations. They've been hiding their true strength for decades." Vextar's flagship shuddered as human weapons tore through its shields. "Send a priority message to the Council. Tell them we need reinforcements. Tell them the humans are not what we thought they were." The message never reached the Council. Kyungsu's squadron had already destroyed the communication arrays. Within a month, the military situation had completely reversed. Council forces that had been attacking human colonies were now desperately trying to defend their own worlds. The species that had dominated the galaxy for millennia were learning what it meant to face an enemy that refused to follow their rules. The Council called for negotiations, but humanity's answer was simple: unconditional surrender. There would be no peace until every Council leader who had authorized the attack on civilians was brought to justice. The galaxy watched in shock as the Vorthak homeworld fell to human forces. Then the Kalari core systems surrendered after their fleet was destroyed in a single day. One by one, the species that had formed the Council either submitted to human terms or fled beyond the galactic rim. The war that the Council had started to control humanity had instead destroyed the Council itself. The species that they had called too young and dangerous to be trusted with freedom was now the dominant military power in the galaxy. But the humans had learned something important during the fighting. Being the strongest didn't mean being the cruelest. Having the power to destroy didn't mean using it without restraint. The Council had used their strength to oppress and control. Humanity would use theirs to protect and liberate. The galaxy was about to learn the difference between a tyrant with power and a protector with power. And that difference would reshape civilization itself. 1 year after the last Council fleet surrendered, Sunho Park stood in what had once been the Galactic Council chambers on Nexus Prime. The great hall that had witnessed humanity's humiliation now served as the headquarters of the Terran Accord, a new form of galactic government built on very different principles. Sunho was not a politician or a diplomat. He had been a mining engineer before the war, working on asteroid extraction platforms in the Outer Rim. But like many humans, the war had changed his life completely. Now he served as the first human galactic coordinator, helping to rebuild a galaxy that had been shattered by decades of Council oppression. The transformation was remarkable. Where the old Council had ruled through fear and rigid hierarchy, the Terran Accord operated on voluntary membership and mutual respect. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were now free to govern themselves. Worlds that had been strip-mined for Council profit were being restored to health. "Coordinator Park," his aide announced. "The Zephyrian delegation has arrived for the integration ceremony." Sunho nodded and walked to the main assembly hall. The Zephyrians had been one of the Council's most oppressed subjects, forced to provide their crystalline bodies as living computers for Council ships. Today they were choosing to join the Terran Accord as free partners. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. Unlike the Council's elaborate rituals of submission, the Accord only required a species to agree to 3 basic principles: respect for individual rights, rejection of aggressive expansion, and protection of member worlds from outside threats. The Zephyrian speaker, a tall crystal being named Harmony of Stars, addressed the assembly in musical tones. "For 3,000 years, our people served the Council's machines. We were property, not citizens. Today we choose partnership with humanity not from fear, but from hope." Sunho accepted the Zephyrian application with a simple handshake. No oaths of loyalty, no tribute payments, no surrender of sovereignty. Just an agreement to work together for mutual benefit. After the ceremony, Sunho walked to his private office and found Yoonji Kim waiting for him. She had been Ambassador Hyunwoo's aide during the war and now served as the Accord's chief diplomatic officer. Her job was to help former Council subjects transition to freedom. "How are the integration programs going?" Sunho asked. Yoonji consulted her datapad. "Better than expected. 47 species have joined the Accord so far. Another 23 are in negotiations. The economic recovery is ahead of schedule." "And the former Council leadership?" Yoonji's expression grew serious. The war crimes tribunals are proceeding. The first speaker and 8 other council leaders have been sentenced to life imprisonment. Admiral Vextar and his officers are serving time for the New Hope massacre. Sunho nodded. Justice was important, but rebuilding was more important. The galaxy needed to heal from centuries of council rule. On the restored world of New Busan, Yujin Song walked through fields that had been burned during the council occupation. The crops were growing again, tended by both human colonists and Kalari refugees who had fled their homeworld when it fell to human forces. Working together, they were producing more food than ever before. Commander Changmin Seo, who had led the liberation of this sector, was now helping coordinate the integration of former council territories. His job was delicate, ensuring that former enemies became new allies rather than conquered subjects. The key is showing them that we're different, he explained to a group of newly graduated Accord officers. The council ruled through fear and punishment. We lead through example and opportunity. It wasn't always easy. Some species struggled to understand freedom after millennia of oppression. Others were suspicious of human motives, expecting hidden demands for tribute or submission. But gradually, trust was being built. The real test came when the Vorthak remnant government requested assistance. Their homeworld had been devastated during the war, their fleet destroyed, their economy collapsed. Under council rules, they would have been abandoned to suffer the consequences of their leaders' choices. The Terran Accord voted to provide humanitarian aid. Sunho personally led the relief mission to the Vorthak homeworld. The blue-skinned aliens who had once demanded human submission now lined up for food distributions managed by human soldiers. The irony was not lost on anyone. "Why do you help us?" asked former Admiral Thekvar, who had been one of the most vocal supporters of the human ultimatum. "We tried to destroy you." Sunho handed a container of medical supplies to a sick Vorthak child. "Because that's what civilized beings do," he replied. "We help those who need help even if they were our enemies." It was that simple philosophy that made the Terran Accord different from the Council. Power was not used to punish or control but to protect and assist. Strength was not measured by how many worlds you could conquer, but by how many people you could help. The transformation wasn't perfect. There were still pirates in the Outer Rim, territorial disputes between species and economic problems left over from the Council era. But for the first time in thousands of years, the galaxy was growing instead of stagnating. New technologies emerged from the collaboration between species. Trade routes flourished under Accord protection. Worlds that had been barren wastelands were being terraformed with combined human and alien expertise. Most importantly, there were no more massacres like the New Hope. No more ultimatums demanding surrender of freedom. No more species forced to serve as slaves for the benefit of their supposed betters. The galaxy had learned what humanity had tried to tell the Council from the beginning. That cooperation was stronger than coercion, that partnership was more productive than domination, and that respect was more valuable than fear. In the memorial garden on New Busan, Hyunwoo Kim stood before the wall containing the names of the 50,000 civilians killed on the transport New Hope. He was old now, his hair completely gray, but he had lived to see the galaxy transformed. A young Kalari child, part of a family that had fled council oppression, placed a flower at the base of the memorial. Her parents had told her about the humans who died so that others could be free. "Grandfather Hyun," she said in careful standard, "will there be another war?" Hyunwoo smiled and patted her head gently. "I hope not, little one. But if there is, it won't be because humanity started it. We learned long ago that peace is better than war. Some people just took longer to understand that lesson." He looked up at the stars visible through the garden's transparent dome. Somewhere out there, human ships were patrolling the trade routes, protecting merchant vessels from pirates and raiders. Former enemies were working together to build new worlds. Children of different species were growing up as friends instead of masters and slaves. The Council had been right about one thing: humanity was dangerous. They were dangerous to tyrants, dangerous to oppressors, dangerous to anyone who believed that might made right. But they were also humanity's greatest protectors, humanity's most reliable allies, and humanity's best hope for a better future. The galaxy was at peace again. But this time, it was a peace built on justice instead of fear, on cooperation instead of submission, on hope instead of despair. And it was protected by a species that understood the true cost of war and the true value of peace. The council had gone too far, and peace had departed from humanity. But in the end, humanity had brought it back, not just for themselves but for everyone.